This video will show the steps in the repair and restoration of a Seth Thomas Poise alarm clock. This particular model is from the 1950s. There are some ways to tell the difference between the earlier model and the later ones. It was also manufactured in the 60s and I believe the 70s. One difference I've noted is that the second hand, and I believe that this short brass hand is for the seconds, is underneath the minute and hour hand. It's the first clock I've ever seen that has a second hand underneath the other two hands. Another way to tell the difference between the models from the 50s and the later ones is that on the back of it, to set the alarm, we have a knob here with the which rotates the time in order to set the alarm. The later models, when you look at the back of it, no longer have this dial. It just has a pull and set knob for the to set the alarm time, and on the front of it is a fourth hand, which is what rotates to set the alarm time. Another way to tell the time when these clocks were manufactured is Seth Thomas puts number codes on the parts on the inside, which usually give it away. They also have a stamp on the bottom of, and this particular one says 5004, which according to my research, this tells me it was built in April of 1950. There should be similar date marks on some of the parts on the inside when I open it up. I received this in a non-working condition, and I believe it's the main reason is the fact that the power cord is really falling apart. All the wire is exposed here. I'm not even going to try to plug it in yet until I open this up and hopefully try to replace the power cord. So that's what we'll get started on first. Another way to test to see if it's going to be restorable is to check the continuity of the wiring to make sure that the coil on the inside of the clock is intact. To do that, you need an ohm meter, and just touch the leads to the power plug. And the numbers are changing, which means we have current going through it, so the wiring is intact and this should be restorable. The first step is opening up the clock. To do that, we have 4 screws here holding the back plate on. I'll undo these and then we'll come back and look to lift the plate up and off. I've removed the 4 screws. Now we'll lift up the plate. And what I'm realizing is that and this is to set the to start the alarm. You pull it out when you want to set your alarm, push it in to turn it off, I assume. This knob is too big for the hole underneath it, which means this has to be removed. And the way to do that, I'll protect the finish a little bit. You have to grab the stem with a vice grip. And we should be able to remove it. A little more. All right. Now let's see if it comes up. Here we go. I think the first thing I'm going to do is just cut off what's left of this power cord and hopefully be able to splice a new one somewhere in here. There's one. Okay. So this cord is pretty much garbage now. It's not even the old Bakelite plug that I could reuse. Put that aside. Now I'm going to have to undo the knot here and expose some better condition of the wire, hook up a new power cord, and we'll see if it works at all. What I've discovered is that the entire cord is all brittle. As soon as I went to lift this up a little bit to access the knot, more of the insulation just flaked off the wire close to where it's connected to the motor, which means I'm going to have to take this whole thing apart and hopefully trace the wire back to where it's attached, and hopefully there's a decent enough connection there that I can replace it at that point. If not, it's going to be next to impossible to restore it. So I'll take a minute or two to figure out the best way to remove everything, and then I'll come back. What I see are 4 screws here, 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 and here, holding this plate to the wood frame. And I'm going to remove those 4, and hopefully the entire clock mechanism will just slide out along with the hands and the glass face. I don't expect the rim to come with it. That's sitting on top of the wood, I believe. But let me take out those 4 and we'll see what happens. I got 3 of the 4 out. Let me remove the last one. Okay. As I had hoped, the whole thing just slid out. There's the 4th screw. Very good. Take the glass out, put that aside. The brass rim seems to be bent over the front and back of the wood, so I don't think that can be removed. I like to polish them up, but I could probably still do it on the wood. But first, I have to see if I can figure out the best way to access this wire. So let me take a closer look to figure out what we want to do first. I do know that I'm going to have to remove the hands. That'll be the first step, and then get the face off. The minute hand comes off first. I know that's on just a friction grip, a very tight fit, and I should be able to pry it off. This one seems particularly tight, so what I'm going to do, I don't want to force it. I use some WD-40 and I spray some into a little cap that I have here. And then with a small paintbrush, I'll just apply some of it around the stem of that's holding the hands. And just going to let that soak in for 5 or 10 minutes, and then we'll come back and see if we can get that off. Okay, it's been soaking for several minutes, and now it should be easier to pry off the minute hand. Very good, very good. And let's see how the hour hand works. That's not bad either. And lastly, this is going to need a bit of the WD-40 as well. And we'll give this one about 5-10 minutes as well. What I've noticed is there's actually a little washer holding the hour hand, or I think what is it, second hand rather, on, which I was able to get off. But despite all my efforts, I've been unable to remove the second hand. And what I'm seeing is that the stem that it's attached to, if you can see how it's attached, you can see the gear moving. And I really don't want to force this thing up too hard. I like to take all the hands off so that I can remove the dial and clean this up. You can see all the stains and dirt that gets on it. But I should be able to clean it up, hopefully, on here. And the next step is going to be addressing the wiring here. One idea that occurred to me, because I tried to restore a different Seth Thomas clock a while ago and had the wires that go into the coil break off from the coil, and what was left exposed was just literally one little strand of wire, and I was unable to attach anything to it, and I couldn't fix the clock. So I'm reluctant to get that far into it here. But one idea is that if I just flake off all of the insulation from this wire and then just wrap it with electrical tape, assuming the wire itself is not brittle, then I can just maintain this wire as it is. So the next step, I'm going to try just to remove all the insulation and see how that looks. Before I do that, though, one thing I want to mention that's kind of funny is no sooner had I said that I'd never seen a clock with a second hand positioned underneath the hour and minute hand before, when I received just now a different Seth Thomas clock that I purchased and discovered that it too has a second hand that's positioned underneath the minute hand and the hour hand. So perhaps it's a Seth Thomas thing. I have other clocks of theirs that don't have this feature, but interesting to note. One other thing I want to show before removing the insulation regarding the dating of the clock is that I see on the parts on the inside here the same number stamped, the 5004, which tells me again it was built in April of 1950. What I've done is started to remove all the insulation from the wires. Very, very brittle. It just flakes right off. Underneath the insulation is actually some thread or cloth covering over the wire. I removed it from this strand. You can just see metal showing here. I need to remove it from here, and then I'll probably cut the wires about here and here, tape it up a bit, and with the bit that's still exposed, that's where I will attach a new power cord from. And that should hopefully maintain the connection into the coil here without disturbing that at all. So let me clean off the rest of this. I'll temporarily attach a new power cord and we'll see if it works. Okay, I've covered the two wires with electrical tape, tied them together here. These are the stripped ends, and now we'll attach a power cord. I've attached a new power cord. I've plugged it in, and it is running. Now, one advantage I have with this clock is that it is not powered by an oil-filled rotor, which means there isn't any oil that leaks out of it over the years and gunks up all of these gears. What you're seeing in here is actually pretty clean as compared to what you find when you try to restore either a Telechron clock or a Hammond clock. So therefore, I probably don't have to open this whole thing up to get the gears out to clean them up, which makes it a lot easier because of the whole alarm mechanism is something new for me to try to figure out. So the next step will be just to clean up the hands, the face, the glass, and the wood case and reassemble it. So I'll get started on that. Everything's cleaned up. I removed the feet from the wood frame, polished up the metal with some Noxon, gives it a good shine. The wood I treat with a product that's Howard's Restore Finish, and it's called Feed and Wax, which is a wax coating, gives it a nice shine. And now I'm just going to reassemble everything. Before I completely assemble it, I wanted to show one thing. You have to synchronize the clock, which usually consists of placing the hour hand on first. I place it at the 12, and then the minute hand goes over that. The one thing that I'm not sure of at the time is, will that also synchronize the alarm? So what I've done is we'll plug it in. And I'm going to set the alarm. Right now it's pointing to about 5:30. I'll turn it to 5. And then we'll advance the hands and see what happens when I hit 5. Well, that's not bad. It looks as if the way that you stop the alarm is by just dialing the hand that sets the time, which tells me that it's only going to ring it the next time that it gets advanced to, so I'm not really certain how this clock is supposed to be turned on and off for the alarm. But in any event, the alarm seems to be synced to the correct time. So I'll unplug it. Oh, by the way, I temporarily hooked up a new power cord here. I'll undo this, place the mechanism back in the frame with the glass in the hands, and then reattach the wire and have it coming out the back. Before closing up the back, I wanted to show you that after I connected the power cord, I placed a knot in it so that once the back is on, if you pull on the wire, it's not going to pull apart the connections. So just have to tuck this in a little bit. Bring this up and over. And now I just have to place the final 4 screws and then the feet. One thing I completely forgot about when I was mentioning how I wasn't sure how you turn the alarm on and off is that there's a stem here to pull out or push in to turn the alarm on or off, and I have to replace the knob that goes on it. So first, grip the stem with the vice grip, and then this screws over it. Just got to tighten it up a bit. There you go. Alarm on, alarm off. Is one of the features that I wanted to show you with this clock. A lot of them have it. It's the little circle with the white dot. That is a power interruption indicator. And what happens is if the power goes out on these clocks, there's a little metal plate that will drop down and it'll turn red. And the theory behind it is back in the 30s, 40s, 50s, when the current coming into your home wasn't as reliable, it was felt that if the power turned off and then came back on, people would come home and wouldn't realize that it's the wrong time on the clock. But if you see the little red dot, that tells you the clock is stopped and you have to find out what time it really is and reset it. And I'll show you how it works. I'll turn the power off. And by doing that, it dropped down to the red dot. Hope you can see that. And the way you fix it is once the power comes back on, I'll turn it back on. What you do is you flip the clock upside down, and that resets it to white. So there you have it, the Seth Thomas Poise alarm clock, built in April of 1950. And if you've enjoyed the video, I have several others, different clocks I've restored in the same way, and feel free to check them out. Bye for now.